Of course. No, we're both survivors. Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, may I now all ask you to be seated? Item number 1, if there are no objections, I propose to adopt the agenda as it stands. Item number 2, our meeting today is as usual being web streamed. We have interpretation in more or less all of our 24 languages. Item number 3, we have minutes to adopt of our meetings on the 16th of October, 18th of November and the 10th of December. If there are no objections from your side, I propose to adopt these minutes without any changes. Item number 4, dear colleagues, first of all, a happy new year, all the best for this year 2025. And I would like to welcome all of you to this exchange of views with the new Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and that's why, first of all, dear Mark Rutte, a warm welcome to the European Parliament and congratulations for your appointment to this important position in these challenging times. I think I can say on behalf of all our colleagues, we wish you every success in your new role, and we look forward to productively working together with you. We have you today for the first time in your new position here in the European Parliament, and it is a good tradition that the Committees for Foreign Affairs and Security and Defence, together with our Delegation for Relations of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, welcome the NATO Secretary General. That's why I would also like to welcome you on behalf of the two chairs, and Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann is sitting here with me up front. I will not be long in my introductory remarks because I have been informed that the Secretary General has to leave us at 5:30 because he's flying to Finland, one of our important member states. That's why, without any further ado, to catch up a bit of time, shall I hand over? Yes, Marie-Agnes, yes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. To make a long story short, great that you are here. I mean, it's a challenge, and this job is really for tough cookies only. So, great. Welcome, and also Happy New Year to all our friends here, and I think we have to start immediately, because time is running.
Super. Dear Secretary General, you have the floor for roughly 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have an exchange of views.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon, and a very happy New Year to you all. It is great to join you today. And this is for me the first time in this big room, after so many years, to be back now in the European Parliament. In this particular room, I think I was here once before, 10 or 12 years ago, for a big meeting between the European Council and the European Parliament. So I have some memory of this room, but I didn't realize it was that big and there would be that many members visiting. So thank you all for being here, and thank you very much for inviting me. Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, Marie-Agnes and David. As you know, I am a European through and through, so I feel very much at home here, and it's great to be here, back here in the European Parliament. Since starting my job in October, I've had many meetings with European leaders. I had the pleasure of hosting the President of the European Commission. I had lunch in her office, and then she came for dinner at my residence. I met with the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, with Kaja Kallas, the EU High Representative, and the European Commissioner for Defence, Kubilius, and I had the honour to participate in the EU Foreign Affairs Council in November. And again, I'm today very happy to meet with you. In the coming months, I intend also to have a somewhat longer meeting with Roberta Metsola, your President, and the heads of the political groups in the European Parliament. And I think this marks the start of a dialogue but also a continuation of all the efforts to bring NATO and the EU, to bring the, NATO and the EU closer together. At this particular dangerous time, this particularly dangerous time for security, stepping up of our cooperation, I believe, is essential. Russia's war against Ukraine rages on. At the same time, Russia is accelerating its destabilization campaign against our own countries with cyber attacks, with assassination attempts, acts of sabotage, and more. We used to call this hybrid. I try to get rid of that word hybrid. I would call it a destabilization campaign. And Russia is not alone. It has China, North Korea, and Iran by its side. Meanwhile, many other dangers persist, from terrorism to nuclear proliferation, disinformation, and of course climate change. And I've said it before, and I say it again. I'm deeply concerned about the security situation in Europe. We are not at war, but we are not at peace either. The good news is that we know what to do to protect our people and way of life, now and in the long term. We just need to do it. That means we need to invest more in defense and produce more capabilities. This cannot wait. We need to boost the resilience of our societies and critical infrastructure. And we need to sustain and step up our support for Ukraine to change the trajectory of the war and deter further Russian aggression in the future. On all of this, defense, resilience, Ukraine, NATO and the EU must work hand in hand. Since the start of Russia's all-out war against Ukraine, we have demonstrated, I believe, unprecedented political unity and unprecedented coherence. I have every intention to help keep this going. And I know there is the same level of commitment within the EU's leadership, in the Parliament, in the Commission, in the Council. Stronger defense is my top priority. And this is about spending more, spending better, but also producing more. Not to provoke war, but to prevent war. NATO allies have certainly increased defense spending. 2/3 are now spending at least 2% of GDP on defense. And that's good, and I very much welcome their efforts. But to be honest, 2% is not nearly enough. To stay safe in the years to come, allies will need to spend considerably more than 2%. As parliamentarians, you know well that security does not come for free. You have a powerful voice, and you have a critical role to play in the debate on the urgent need to increase defense spending. I know spending more on defense means spending less on other priorities if you do not want to raise taxes. I'm a centre-right politician, so I don't like raising taxes. But of course, you could still do it as long as the money is being delivered. But generally speaking, spending more on defense means spending less on other priorities. But it can make a big difference for our future security. On average, European countries easily spend up to 1/4 of their national income on pensions, health and social security systems. And we need only a small fraction of that money to make defense much stronger. So I count on you to make sure we all invest more in defense. It is an investment in our security and the security of our children and grandchildren. We also need to quickly ramp up the production of crucial assets and capabilities, including ships, tanks, jets, munitions, satellites and drones. A few months ago, I visited engineers in Paris at Thales and a Rheinmetall factory in Italy. Yes, a Rheinmetall factory in Italy. So this was a subsidiary of Rheinmetall based outside Rome. European defense industry is doing truly impressive work, and the capabilities they provide are essential. But the reality is that we are not where we need to be, not yet. Our industry is still too small, it is too fragmented, and to be honest, it is too slow. I welcome and support that the EU is now redoubling efforts to remedy this by enhancing our defense industrial base. And with the European Defence Industry Programme, we have an opportunity to bolster our shared security. Yet, while I enthusiastically applaud, I also here urge caution. I believe we must avoid creating new barriers between allies that would only increase costs, complicate production and hamper innovation. Involving non-EU allies in EU defence industrial efforts is vital, I believe, for the security of Europe. Transatlantic defence industrial cooperation makes us all stronger. At a time when Russia, China, North Korea and Iran are increasing their defence industrial cooperation to unprecedented levels, it would be an act of self-harm to put up new barriers between allies within NATO. We must also avoid duplicating existing structures. We cannot afford to waste time and resources. But we are all well placed to complement each other, and that's exactly what we should work to do. NATO is great at the hard stuff. We have the structures in place to set military standards, to set capability targets and produce them jointly. On the other hand, the EU has the awesome advantage of the internal market. That's a huge soft power element. It can help get defence production going at a much higher pace. And therefore I believe that cooperation is truly win-win. My next point is on resilience, another area where both our organisations, EU and NATO, already work closely together. But we can and we must do more. Cyber attacks, acts of sabotage, espionage, disinformation, instrumentalised migration, our countries are increasingly the target of hostile actions. The most recent example is the damage to an undersea power cable connecting Estonia and Finland on December 25th. And a communications cable between Lithuania and Sweden was damaged last November. We must be more resilient to such hostile actions. And we must make clear that efforts to wage war through sabotage and other destabilisation will not go unanswered. And that's why tomorrow, and that's why I'm travelling to Finland tonight, tomorrow, together with Finnish President Stubb and Estonian Prime Minister Michal, I am co-hosting the first ever Baltic Sea NATO Allies Summit in Helsinki. At the summit, a group of allied leaders will take further steps to prevent any further damage of undersea assets and to improve the resilience of energy and communications infrastructure. And we will also strengthen NATO's military presence in the region. And of course we will discuss the shadow fleet and what to do about it. So we are responding and will continue to ensure no country can exploit us, control our infrastructure or disrupt our societies. This is not a job for NATO alone. We need to work together, leveraging our strength and expertise in tandem to keep our population safe. And then my last point on Ukraine. The future of European and global security hinges on the outcome of the war in Ukraine. We all want this war to end. But above all, we want a peace to last. I don't know how or when the war will end. But I do know peace will not last if Putin gets his way in Ukraine. Because then he will press ahead. He has threatened to start wars in the past and he has started them. Georgia in 2008, Ukraine in 2014 and again in 2022. So what is the next target to be? Peace will not last if war ends with a deal where Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un and the regime in Tehran are high-fiving each other, feeling empowered. A deal in Ukraine that serves their interests paves the way to global instability. So I'm convinced that peace can only last if Ukraine comes to the table from a position of strength. For this, it needs our continued help. More weapons and faster, so it can defend itself better and negotiate a good deal for Ukraine, for Europe and for the world. NATO allies are providing more, and the EU support continues to be crucial. Last week, at the Ukraine Defence Contact Group meeting in Ramstein last Thursday, the US and European allies announced further aid to Ukraine. And these additional contributions are vital. NATO and the European Union have a lot to do together. And I can count on you, I know, as members of the European Parliament, to keep up the support for Ukraine. for their freedom and ours too. And I can count on you to continue strengthening our own defences. We can't afford to wait. We are safe now. We are not safe in 5 years. So we have to start today, spending more, ramping up production, getting resilience right and supporting Ukraine. I will now stop. I very much look forward to our discussion. I will try to answer as many questions as possible. I know you cannot come back if you do not like my answer, but I will not give you, I hope, any reason to get back to me by answering the question in the first place in a correct way. So I'll try to do my utmost. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Secretary General, for your valuable overview and also for underlining how crucially important the cooperation, the partnership between the European Union and NATO is. I now give the floor first to our chair of the delegations for relations with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, our colleague Salvatore De Meo, for a maximum 3 minutes. Please, Salvatore.
Thank you, Chair. I will speak in Italian for my support. Grazie signor Segretario Generale per la sua presenza che ci conforta e conferma, eccomi qua, e conferma la volontà della sua istituzione di voler rafforzare il pilastro europeo all'interno dell'Assemblea parlamentare della NATO. A novembre scorso c'è stata l'Assemblea parlamentare e la nostra delegazione ha espresso in maniera chiara l'intenzione di voler cooperare affinché NATO e Unione Europea siano due istituzioni che lavorino in parallelo e non in contrapposizione. Il lavoro è molto difficile, complesso, ma credo che i primi passi che stiamo seguendo, anche con la sua presenza, vanno nella giusta direzione. Lei ha fatto riferimento alla necessità di dover investire di più in difesa. Io le rappresento la necessità di dover spiegare che la difesa non è limitata solo alla dimensione militare, ma che è una dimensione che va oltre l'aspetto tipicamente militare e include relazioni internazionali, economiche, sociali e soprattutto diplomatiche. In questo il Parlamento europeo può essere di grande aiuto. 23 paesi alleati sono stati europei e quindi le confermo la disponibilità della nostra istituzione a fare in modo che ci sia questa sensibilizzazione perché l'investimento non sia un obbligo ma sia una consapevolezza che soltanto mettendo insieme le nostre forze, non sostituendosi alle difese nazionali, noi possiamo migliorare la capacità difensiva e difesa significa benessere sociale, welfare, economia, opportunità per tutti. Io le chiedo se le differenze politiche dei vari paesi alleati, soprattutto quelle che possono emergere all'indomani di elezioni politiche presenti e successive. Siamo alla vigilia anche di un appuntamento elettorale importante di un partner come il Canada, possano mettere a rischio la nostra solidità e soprattutto se possano esserci dei rischi rispetto al supporto incondizionato che abbiamo espresso nei confronti dell'Ucraina, perché è vero, noi abbiamo bisogno di garantire una pace giusta e duratura in Ucraina per poter assicurare il prossimo futuro di pace. E a questo riguardo le chiedo se ci sono rischi su altri fronti, parlo del Mediterraneo, parlo dei Balcani, che sono ovviamente focolai importanti a cui non possiamo non porre la massima attenzione. Concludo il mio intervento chiedendole di dover fare uno sforzo perché l'opinione pubblica non venga divisa. Non bisogna cadere nell'errore di semplificare la discussione in difesa uguale armamenti. E in questo apprezzo l'iniziativa della NATO di voler promuovere anche un Consiglio dei giovani, perché è importante la loro posizione e sono convinto che ci possano aiutare a far capire che insieme si può, insieme possiamo fare la differenza. Grazie e buon lavoro.
Thank you, Salvatore. As this is a joint item with SEDE, I will now hand over to Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann to chair the first round of question and answers. This first round is for AFET and SEDE coordinators by group, and this all for 2 minutes each. So it will be quite a challenge to handle this, but we're in safe hands with Marie-Agnes.
Okay, let's start with the coordinator of the AFET EPP, Michael Gahler.
Yes,
2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and a very warm welcome on behalf of the EPP group. Rest assured that not only my group, but the large majority of this committee and the Parliament are on your track, are on our common track when it comes to strengthening defence and also when it comes specifically to Ukraine. I'm also the standing rapporteur on Ukraine, so thanks for the remarks that you made in this regard. My question goes in the direction, as it is clear, there is a perspective of membership, but not during the hot phase of the war, certainly, but before full membership and after the end of the hot phase, there needs to be security guarantees for the country. How do you see this aspect to be addressed? What can we already now do to get Ukraine closer to NATO? And what are your thoughts about that? And where would you need to push some member states to be more positive about that? That is the one aspect. You rightly spoke about the closer EU-NATO cooperation. And you spoke of standards that you have in NATO. Now, my question is whether you would be inclined to embark on a new thought, meaning that as we also have a single market on defence, allegedly, I say, in EU since 2011, we know how little it has been practiced, but in the civilian part of the single market, we have thousands of standards that are agreed through regulations that are binding. Now, I learned that in NATO, you agree on standards, but we see in many areas that member states simply don't follow. So would you think starting discussions on behalf of NATO with EU to have existing, I speak of existing agreed NATO standards to be transformed in parallel into binding EU regulations? I think that would really get NATO where it should be, that everybody applies the standards, because we have treaty violation procedures. NATO has not. So is that an idea for you to grasp? Thank you.
Thank you. For SEDE EPP, Nicolas Pascual de la Parte. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year to everybody. We welcome Secretary General here around, in front of you. Thank you very much. I will raise 3 quick points for you to answer, please. The first one is how to increase the cooperation between NATO and the European Union, which is one of the main aspects of your speech. I think that here we have capacities and possibilities that you don't have in NATO, and the other way around. For instance, here in the European Union, we can raise funds because we have a budget, a collective budget, something that you don't have in NATO. You have only a very small administrative fund, but you don't have a budget. And secondly, we can legislate even with legally binding directives and regulations. These capacities, I think, that could somehow be inserted as well in your decision-making process in NATO as one of the main strands of collaborations. I'm aware that there's quite a number of strands of work that we are collaborating already, more than 60, 65, 66, but I think that this legislative capacity and the budgetary capacity of the European Union should be somehow inserted as well in your decision-making process in NATO. First question. The second one is capacity planning. I think that now that we have a new commissioner for the first time for defence in the European Union, he will be asked to develop plans. He's going to present the white paper for defence within the next 100 days together with the High Representative. And one of the main items will be the capacity planning for our military industry. How do you intend to avoid duplications concerning this very important thing? The capacity planning in NATO is very well oiled, is working properly well, and you have a great experience now. And the third one is how to shorten the time of developing new weapon systems. I mean, so far the average time is 15 years, since a project system is designed until it is totally operational. I think that we cannot continue with this. How do you intend to shorten up this time to develop new weapon systems? Thank you very much.
Okay, for S&D, the AFET, I have been told that nobody will be there. So if there anybody, okay. Tonino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary General, I would like to welcome you to our House on behalf of S&D in your new role in this very timely moment, 1 week before President Trump takes over. In line with the NATO strategic concept, I echo that NATO enlargement has been a historic success. It has strengthened our alliance and contributed to peace and stability. You have said recently, and you repeated this afternoon, that we face a growing number of challenges globally, from a more aggressive Russia to terrorism, to strategic competition with China, as well as increasing alignment of China, Russia, North Korea and Iran. But beyond this, let me extend my interest to our immediate neighborhood. Secretary General, last year you have visited Srebrenica in Bosnia and Herzegovina. As experienced leader and former Prime Minister, you are certainly very well acquainted with security challenges in the Western Balkans, which was once called the power keg of the Europe. Therefore, I would use the opportunity to ask you two questions. How do you see the role of hybrid warfare, not only in the EU, but also in the Western Balkans, where we have seen increased activity by Russia, particularly with disinformation, as in the case of recently opened Russia Today TV in Serbia? And how would you assess the security situation in the Western Balkans in general, and what would be some initiatives or activities you are planning to conduct as a NATO Secretary General? Thank you in advance.
Thank you very much. And S&D Sede, Yanis.
Here, Mr. Secretary General. Thank you very much for your presence in our committee, and I wish you every success in your mandate. You take over at a period when we have the war in Ukraine, war in Gaza, regime change in Syria, and the increase in hybrid attacks on the infrastructure of members of the Union and NATO, and even attempts to interfere in the democratic functions of the countries. At this critical time for Europe, we are exactly 1 week before President Trump returns to the White House. Last week's interview about his plans for acquisitions and annexations against 2 NATO members, Denmark and Canada, was shocking to say the least. In this very difficult context, I would like to ask you how you intend to ensure the unity of the alliance and the protection of the border integrity of all member states. I would also like to ask you to tell us about the cooperation between the European Union and NATO in addressing the hybrid threats that many member states are facing, and more generally, how do you see defence cooperation between the European Union and NATO? Would you be supportive of a more autonomous European defence? Finally, I would like to ask you about defence spending. What would be for you an adequate target instead of 2% of GDP? Wouldn't it be more effective to focus on making better use of defence spending than to ask for its continued increase? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For AFET Patriots, Jordan Bardella.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, merci de votre présence devant cette commission. Moi, je souhaiterais vous entendre sur le rôle d'un État clé de l'OTAN qu'est la Turquie. Entre intimidation frontalière à l'égard de la Grèce, sa politique de réarmement drastique et son rapprochement avec Moscou, la Turquie redéfinit son rôle sur la scène internationale en face d'une Europe bien naïve quant à la marche du monde. D'un côté, la Turquie cherche à endormir l'Occident à travers sa participation à l'OTAN et la ratification d'accords de coopération en matière migratoire. De l'autre, ses ambitions expansionnistes et sa politique agressive en Méditerranée la placent parmi ces puissances qui ne nous veulent pas nécessairement du bien. Pour le président Erdogan, l'OTAN est un outil d'influence de ses propres ambitions, lui qui rêve de faire de son pays une porte de l'Est et un pont en mesure de regarder à la fois vers Moscou et à la fois vers l'OTAN. Le récent refus d'Ankara de participer à l'exercice aérien de l'Alliance en Grèce en septembre dernier doit, je le crois, attirer notre attention. Ce geste n'est pas isolé et s'inscrit dans la volonté d'asseoir une ambition régionale, en oubliant parfois ses obligations vis-à-vis de l'Alliance dont la Turquie est censée partager les valeurs. Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, la liste des provocations turques est longue comme le bras. Je me permets de rappeler que la Turquie a joué un rôle actif dans la crise migratoire aux frontières de l'Europe en y acheminant délibérément des réfugiés syriens, qu'elle entretient les plus grandes ambiguïtés à l'égard du fondamentalisme islamiste. Elle s'est vivement opposée à la France sur le plan diplomatique en 2020, a usé d'un chantage inacceptable à notre égard concernant l'adhésion de la Suède à l'OTAN. Elle reste le seul État de l'Alliance à ne pas s'associer aux sanctions contre la Russie. Elle continue de violer la souveraineté territoriale de Chypre et de la Grèce en mer Égée, y empêchant le forage d'entreprises européennes. Et en tant que deuxième armée de l'OTAN, la Turquie se sait incontournable. La question que je souhaiterais donc vous poser est simple. Comment appréhendez-vous ce double jeu de la Turquie au sein de l'Alliance Atlantique? Je vous remercie.
Merci für Sede, Pierre Romain.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Juste ici. Je vais continuer en français. Monsieur le secrétaire général, le stratégiste français Hervé Couteau-Bégarry écrivait « L'OTAN est cette alliance dans laquelle tous les membres sont égaux, mais l'un est plus égal que les autres. Il se trouve aujourd'hui qu'à la tête de ce pays plus égal que les autres, il y a désormais un homme qui a l'intention d'afficher au grand jour les ambitions de l'Amérique, de maximiser ses intérêts, y compris, parfois, aux dépens de ses alliés. Il y a quelques jours, dans une interview avec l'agence de presse allemande dpa, vous avez déclaré, Monsieur le secrétaire général, qu'il serait souhaitable que les États-Unis libéralisent leur marché de la défense afin que les Européens puissent s'approvisionner plus facilement. Autrement dit, les Européens doivent céder au chantage américain et alourdir encore leur dépendance industrielle et technologique. Ce serait, selon vous et selon d'autres, un moyen d'obtenir la paix au sein de l'Alliance Atlantique. Pourtant, la guerre d'Ukraine sur le sol européen a montré l'importance d'adapter en Europe une logique industrielle de masse, de stock. Cette guerre d'attrition montre aussi que la dépendance à la production et aux livraisons d'une puissance extérieure est un risque, car on dépend alors de décisions politiques extérieures sur lesquelles nous n'avons pas de prise. À l'inverse de ce discours de concession, il est dans l'intérêt des États européens de tenir un discours d'affirmation. C'est d'ailleurs ce que souhaitent les équipes de Trump. Écoutons ce que dit le vice-président J.D. Vance lorsqu'il exhorte les États européens à ne plus être des États clients, mais devenir des alliés forts qui se respectent et se font respecter sur le continent. J'aimerais donc vous demander, Monsieur le secrétaire général, comment vous concevez l'idée d'un pilier européen au sein de l'OTAN? Est-ce l'idée d'un super consommateur européen faisant ses provisions de l'autre côté de l'Atlantique pour maintenir sa sympathie? Ou est-ce l'idée d'un rééquilibrage qui passe par une remontée en puissance industrielle en Europe, davantage de dépenses en Europe, et peut-être plus tard par un partage plus équitable des responsabilités? Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. For AFET ECR, Adam Bilan.
Here. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It is a privilege to welcome you, Mr. Secretary General, to our committee today. Your leadership at NATO comes at a pivotal time when Europe and the transatlantic community face challenges of unprecedented complexity and urgency. The Russian aggression against Ukraine has shattered the post-Cold War security order and reminded us that peace in Europe cannot be taken for granted. NATO's role in providing collective security, deterring aggression and projecting stability has never been more critical. Tomorrow's summit of Baltic Sea NATO countries highlights the growing importance of the Baltic region in the strategic planning. Russia remains the most immediate and significant threat to NATO's eastern flank. The militarization of Kaliningrad, the use of hybrid tactics in Belarus and the shadow fleet operating in the Baltic Sea pose direct challenges to Poland and the Baltic states. These actions are part of Russia's broader strategy to destabilize the region and weaken NATO's cohesion. So my question to you would be, what concrete actions is NATO planning to counter these specific Russian threats, particularly in terms of enhanced forward presence, rapid deployment capabilities, and coordinated hybrid response strategies? How is NATO preparing for potential escalation scenarios, including unconventional tactics such as cyber attacks or energy weaponization in this region? And last, we note with great interest NATO's recent assumption of air defense operation in Poland from the United States. This transaction underscores Europe's growing role in securing its own defense and supporting Ukraine. Poland's logistic hubs are critical in ensuring the flow of military equipment and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, making their defense a top priority. What are NATO's plans to further foster air defense capabilities in Poland and broader eastern flank, particularly now as threats are evolving? Thank you.
Thank you very much. For SEDE ECR, Reinis.
Labdien, ģenerālsekretāra kungs, paldies par jūsu brīnišķīgo stāstījumu. Grūti tam ir nepiekrist, ja vien neņem vērā, ka drīz būs 3 pilni gadi kopš pilna mēroga iebrukuma Ukrainā, 11 gadi kopš karš tur vispār notiek, un arī 11 gadi kopš, teiksim, atklātiem, jums nepatīk vārds hibrīda iebrakumiem, jūs to saucat par sabotāžu vai, manuprāt, valsts atbalstītu terorismu dažādās pasaules malās, un šis laiks ir diezgan ātri iet uz priekšu. Man ir tāds jautājums, vai jūs, varbūt jums ir kāds redzējums, kas mums traucē attīstīties un iet uz priekšu ātrāk, kļūt stiprākiem, un arī kādi konkrēti, varbūt, jūs redzat risinājums, kā tieši cīnīties ar šo sabotāžu vai valstu atbalstīto terorismu, jo skaidrs, kopš 49. gada ir mainījusies izpratnē par to, kas ir apdraudējumi, un mēs visi saprotam, ka tie vairs nav tikai tieši bruņot iebrukumi, bet arī dažādi citu veida uzbrukumi. Vai jums ir kāds, varbūt, jau konkrēts redzējums, ko NATO varētu darīt vai ko mainīt, lai pret to cīnītos? Paldies.
Maybe you could share what NATO could do to
combat this. For effort renew, Hilde.
Wel, dankjewel. En beste Mark, allereerst, hier zit ik. Allereerst heel erg bedankt voor uw energie en het enthousiasme dat je brengt in de NAVO-hoofdkwartier en gefeliciteerd. We verwachten ook vanuit België heel erg veel van u als nieuwe secretaris-generaal. En ik vind dat we met Europa eigenlijk vandaag staan we op een Kennedy-punt. Komen zijn op het punt van defensie. Als not what NATO can do for us, but also what Europe can do for NATO. En ik moet u zeggen, de kritiek van Trump is vaak niet de meest verfijnde. Zeker niet op het vlak van de NAVO is ze helaas terecht, moeten we toch wel zeggen. En om dit probleem aan te pakken hebben wij toch wel een heel duidelijke eigen Europese militaire dynamiek nodig.